Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Regroup Show. I am your host, LJ Walker, a real estate investor helping you realize your dreams of owning a home or investing in one. So you can consider this sort of a part two, and it is also a reboot regarding domestic violence. But this time, we're going to look at what happens if you are the landlord or the co-op board. Okay. See, when I was looking at Keke, I see that Keke not only owns a home in California, but she also has property here in New York. I know that those are apartments, but I'm not sure if they're co-op or condo. When I was looking at Darius, it doesn't appear as though he owns a home. Okay. So, in addition, I've been listening to other people talk about the situation, and someone had said, oh, whoever, don't rent to him, throw him out. Well, listen, let me give you guys some advice. If you are a landlord and you discover that the tenants in one of your apartments are involved in some sort of domestic abuse. And then I'll talk about co-ops a little later on. So here's what you need to know as a landlord. If the victim that's living in your apartment files for a restraining order, or they have a letter from the healthcare provider that they have been physically, severely hurt, brutalized from the abuser that's also living in your building, then that victim can terminate the lease at any time. They do not have to pay you, up for the full year. They can just get up and go. And this, from what I see, is true in no matter what state they're in. The other thing that they can do is they can change the locks on the apartment. They have the right to do that without even notifying you. Okay, so that may go against what you already have in your lease, but know that it is perfectly legal as long as they have one of the two documents that I just mentioned. Okay, now the other thing is, let's say you suspect that domestic violence is occurring in the apartment. If you just hear noise, they're not going to act on it. They're not going to do anything. You have to physically have seen one person hit the other person. The abuser hit the victim. If you have seen that, then you should report it, because if you don't, you can get in trouble. Especially if that abuser then turns around and, let's say, hits another tenant in your building, or even if they hit somebody next door. We live in a litigious society. They can come after you. They can sue you because you didn't report it. So when you report it and say, this is what's going on, this is what I saw, you need to write it down somewhere and keep a record of it. Write down the date in which you reported it. Write down the name of the sergeant, the police officer that you spoke to, and what you said, just to cover yourself. And you can also file a restraining order against that abuser. Okay, I had a situation, well, not me personally, a lady from my church. We were in a class called the Mind of Christ. And while we were in that course, she had a situation where the husband shot at the wife. So when that happened, you know, she was scared, she was alarmed, and so were the other tenants. So she really had no choice but to call herself. You don't have to wait for the victim to call the police and say, "Oh, I'm going to mind my business." No, especially if they are using guns and they are shooting. No, you need to call the police, and it is best that you get a restraining order. The other thing that you can do, and you would have to consult a lawyer about this, there's something called a bifurcation. I don't know how to pronounce that word too clearly, but it's basically just removing the abuser's name off of the lease. Okay? That is what you, and you know, different states, of course, is going to handle the whole situation in a different manner. And yes, although there are some states that are quote unquote more tenant friendly than landlord friendly, when it comes to guns being shot up in a home, especially if that home has children living in it, whether it is your children, the victim and abuser's children, or another tenant's children is in that home, oh no, they are going to be on your side, and they will try to push that case up. I know a lot of things are backed up now, but they're going to try and push a case like that up because that is a threat and a danger that they are causing not only to you and your family, but to all of the families in your home and also in your neighborhood. Okay, so definitely stand firm. Try not to look scared when it's best not to confront the abuser, but if you have to, stand firm, but don't get like too prideful where, you know, oh, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to do this. No, and don't even say any of those things. Definitely call a cop. And when you act scared, and let's say this is something that has to go to court, or you're called into court for whatever reason, that's when you act scared. Okay, but I hope everybody understands what I'm trying to say. You can't let this go. You can't let it go if it's occurring on your particular property. Okay. Now, here's the thing. And this happens, sometimes the victim brings the abuser back. Sometimes they quote unquote make up and decide to get back together. At that point, you, as the landlord, you have the right to evict both the victim and the abuser, even if they paid you the rent on time. Especially if you yourself, as a landlord, filed a restraining order. Okay? It's very important that you realize this and understand this. Let's say you're not a landlord, but you are a tenant, and you know that one of the other tenants in your building has a domestic violence situation going on, and you yourself heard a gunshot, you yourself saw a gun, you too can also file a restraining order against that abuser. A lot of times, those of us in particular neighborhoods, we don't do anything because we don't know what our rights are, and we're scared. But I'm just letting you know that you do have these rights out here to protect you. Okay. Now, on the reverse side, right? Let's say someone who is a victim applies for an apartment. Most background checkers are now not even allowed to even say somebody is a victim of domestic violence. So you probably will never know anyway, unless they actually tell you and they admit it to you. Okay, you cannot discriminate against them. You have to process their application just like anybody else. And if they qualify, and they were early enough to apply, then yes, you do have to give them the apartment. Okay? Now, when it comes to the abuser, you can discriminate against that abuser, especially if if they were convicted of that crime. That's number one. And then also, depending on the state, how long ago the crime was committed. So in Darius's case, he hasn't necessarily been convicted in court yet. He's more or less been convicted on social media, because not only with the pictures that Keke saw, but now the other girlfriend that is coming out saying that he abused her. And then also with his brother admitting, oh, I used to do that too, right? So that means that the brother already knew what he was about. So in that form, he's been convicted in social media. That's what I mean, right? So once he's convicted in court, okay, then yes, if he was to apply tomorrow, the day after that court filing, and he was to apply for an apartment in your building and you are not comfortable with it, you do not have to rent to him, even if he qualifies. Now, if 10, 20 years go by and he does not, that's even if he manages to live that long, but if 10 to 20 years go by and he does not commit another battery, he's not involved in domestic violence for another 10 to 20 years, then yeah, that would be considered discrimination. But if he was to do it right now, then no, it would not be considered discrimination. Oh, not now, I'm sorry. After the court case, then no, it would not be considered discrimination if you decided that you don't want to let him in, especially if you have kids, especially. Okay? The courts will definitely be on your side. If I'm not a lawyer, but from my experience, my knowledge, I know this to be true, but definitely double check with your lawyer, since we're not in the same state, and I don't invest in every single state in the United States. It's only a few states that I'm invested in that I know about. All right? Okay. If you wanted to know if someone who is applying has that in their background, I do recommend, one site I've used is My Rental, and they not only do national background checks, but now they do international background checks. So the person can be from overseas, and you can run a background check and see what their criminal history is. There's others too, I just haven't used. It's just My Rental and Instant Checkmate. Those are the only two that I've used. Now, when it comes to co-ops, okay, listen. So when you are applying for a co-op board, and again, Keke, I don't know if it's a co-op or a condo she has, but she has two of them here in New York. Now, a co-op board will look at the applicant, and they'll look at the criminal background. And if they see violence, you're not getting that apartment. Even if you have the money, the down payment, good credit, etc., etc., you would not get that apartment if you were applying. Now, if you already have the apartment, that's a different situation. So I'm pretty sure that as it stands, Keke is okay, right? But if Keke was to take him back, these boards here in Manhattan, they don't play, especially if there are certain people on that board. And I'm not going to say what kind of people, because I don't want people to I don't want y'all to be like, oh, that sounds a little, it can come off sounding a little prejudiced. But I'm telling you what I know. If there are certain people on the board, even though you already have the apartment, even if you are paying your HOA dues, they're going to find a way. They're going to find a way to, if they can't get rid of you, at least make you feel extremely uncomfortable. That's facts. Okay? Now, I will tell you this. I will give you just a little example. Now, there is a co-op that I know of. It's not downtown in the ritzy areas where certain people live. It's in another area. It's uptown. But it's the part of uptown that's been gentrified. And that particular building, let's just say there's more gentrifiers than non-gentrifiers living in that particular co-op building. There was an instance where there was a couple and domestic violence was said to have been occurring in that apartment. Needless to say, make a long story short, the co-op building got rid of the abuser. And it was easy because he wasn't even paying his HOA fees. Mad easy. So they foreclosed on him and took the apartment from the guy. The victim had left at that particular point. So it was done swiftly and professionally, to say the least. Okay, this is Manhattan. This is money-making Manhattan that I'm in. And like I say, when I say they don't play that, they don't play that. You cannot, it's here. It occurs. It happens. But people will get together and behind your back without you knowing. And they have ways to get rid of you. And then the other thing that I do know too is, even like if you have like a homeowners association, so it's not like a co-op where there's like different apartments, but let's say there's townhomes, right? Townhomes, and then even regular apartment buildings. If too many people on one block, too many of those homeowners on one block call the police on a certain individual or a certain couple, and if too many of them get restraining orders against that particular couple that's involved in domestic violence, that couple gonna have to leave. Regardless, that couple is gonna have to leave. And best believe, yes, the landlord of that building, because I know of one, does not live in that building, but it was known, he was made known, he was going to get sued if he didn't get rid of them. Okay, so play if you want to, but guys, male and female, because I've seen women also abuse men. There are people out here that's not playing. The victim, the person that you're with, they will play with you and they can play with you, but everybody else that sees what you're doing is not going to play with you. They don't have time for it. So you need to tread wisely, because once you get that conviction And you don't necessarily, it's not the victim that necessarily has to come for you. Other people, if they also have something on you, it does attach to your record. And when it attaches to your record, it limits what you can do when it comes to housing. It limits you getting housing. Okay, it's not too many people that's going to want to rent to you. And to be honest with you, I even found out that there are some banks, like let's say you wanted to buy a house, there are some banks that won't even give you a loan if you have a criminal record. You would have to go to like a credit union or use creative financing in order to get property. And then even still, you might, if it's a certain type of crime, such as domestic violence, you might still have some issues. So get that anger management, get that, speak to a therapist, get some healing, get some counseling in before it is too late. All right. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys. That's what I wanted to let you guys know. It is a reboot from a video that I did before on safe housing, and I just added a few more things because that was years ago that I made that video, and certain things arose in my own personal life that I wanted to share with you and let you guys be aware of. So guys, feel free to pass this along. Remember, each one, reach one, teach one. Bye for now. Until next time, have a good night.